In the year 2125, humanity had already taken its first steps into the cosmos. Mars was a colony. The Moon was a hub for mining operations, and interstellar travel had become a reality, albeit for the few. Deep space, however, was still a mystery. A vast expanse where no human had yet ventured. That was until something unexpected happened. It began with a strange signal. It's a kind of signal that made the scientists in the SETI observatories lean in and squint at their monitors, wondering if they'd missed something. The deep space antenna in Antarctica, one of the most powerful in the world, had picked up a transmission. It wasn't the typical noise that had come from pulsars, quasars, or the usual cosmic background radiation. This was something different. Something deliberate. Dr. Ella Rivera, a leading astrophysicist, was one of the first to examine the data. She sat hunched over the display screen, her eyes tracing the patterns in the waveform. Something that looked suspiciously like a code. The signals were rhythmic, repeating with regular intervals. It wasn't just random noise, it was a message. "It's too precise," she muttered to herself. The thought kept racing through her mind as she zoomed in on the data. "It's too structured to be natural." Her colleague, Dr. Samuel Klein, an expert in signal processing, leaned over her shoulder. "What do you mean? You think it's ... alien?" Ella didn't reply immediately. Instead, she ran the data through a series of algorithms designed to detect patterns. Each time, it came back with the same conclusion. The signal was artificial. But why hadn't anyone else picked it up before? Or had they? Her mind raced. It wasn't until she accessed a deeper layer of the signals. Complexity that the full weight of what she was seeing hit her. There were odd anomalies embedded in the signal, small sequences that repeated in ways that suggested an intelligence was at work. It was as though whoever or whatever had sent it wanted someone to understand the message. The rhythmic pulse. The mathematical precision. The intervals. It was all too deliberate to be a cosmic accident. Ella felt a rush of excitement mixed with an unsettling chill. "This isn't just a signal," she said, her voice rising slightly. "It's a message. But it's encoded like a language." Dr. Klein blinked, looking at the screen in disbelief. "So it's not just a hello, it's something more." "I think so," she said. She adjusted her glasses and ran another test. A thought was creeping into her mind, a terrifying, exhilarating thought. What if humanity wasn't alone? What if someone, somewhere out there, was trying to communicate with them? Should we inform the public? Klein asked. Ella hesitated. "No, not yet. We need to understand what we're dealing with first. If this is real, we need to be careful how we handle it." But even as she said the words, she knew the truth. The world would know soon enough. Once the news spread that Earth had detected a signal from deep space, everything would change. It would be impossible to keep it a secret for long. Ella and Klein worked through the night, sending encrypted messages to the top officials in the scientific community. The discovery needed to be verified, every detail double-checked before any major decisions were made. The message, however, was too clear to ignore. The source of the signal was far away, about 60 light-years from Earth, in a system that was previously unexplored. By morning, the news had leaked. Headlines across the world screamed of a mysterious signal from deep space. Social media exploded with wild theories. Some believed it was a sign of an alien civilization reaching out, while others feared it was a trapsome cosmic snare laid by an unknown species. The world was abuzz with questions, and the world's governments and space agencies scrambled to organize a response. At the United Earth's Assembly, the leaders of the world convened an emergency meeting. Among them was General Marcus Price, a man known for his no-nonsense approach to security, and Ambassador Alina Wu, who represented the interests of the United Earth Council's scientific and diplomatic arms. Price was skeptical, while Ambassador Wu was cautiously optimistic. "General, we need to investigate this." This could be humanity's first real contact with another intelligent species, Wu said, her voice steady despite the obvious weight. Of the moment, Price crossed his arms, his face hard. Or it could be something much worse. We don't know anything about these beings, if they even exist. I'm not sure this is a risk we should take lightly. The risk is humanity's. Future Marcus, Ambassador Wu responded. We have to know. This signal, it could change everything. If we turn our back on it, we might never get a second chance. Price sighed. I agree. But let's not forget, if they're reaching out, we have no idea what they want from us. This could be the greatest mistake we ever make. The council agreed to form an international task force. The first step was to decode the signal fully and send a response. Dr. Rivera was appointed to lead a team of scientists and engineers, tasked with investigating the source of the signal, while the United Earth military began preparations for a potential deep space mission. The clock was ticking. As the world's eyes turned skyward, wondering whether this was the beginning of something extraordinary or the harbinger of disaster. The silence of space seemed almost deafening. Humanity's next steps would determine whether they were ready for what lay beyond the star. The decision to respond was made quickly, too quickly, some would say. The United Earth Assembly, spurred on by the weight of the moment and the overwhelming curiosity of the world's population, ordered the formation of a response team. The message was clear. Humanity would make contact. Within days, the newly formed First Contact Initiative began its planning phase. A fleet was assembled with the sole purpose of reaching the source of the signal. It would be humanity's most ambitious mission, yet deep space travel into uncharted territories to meet a potentially unknown civilization. The stakes were higher than ever before. Dr. Ella Rivera had been leading the scientific team that had uncovered the truth behind the mysterious signal. With her sharp mind and calm demeanor, she was the logical choice to lead the team. Her task would be to analyze the data from the alien signal and prepare the team for the journey. But as she looked over the final preparations, she felt a sense of unease. We're sending a message into the unknown, she said, standing in front of a holographic map of the galaxy, her fingers tracing the path to the signal's source. And we have no idea what we'll find. We have to be ready for anything. Captain Darius Holt, the fleet commander, had a different perspective. A decorated military strategist and veteran of several deep space campaigns, Holt was known for his decisiveness and unconventional methods. His reputation preceded him, calm under pressure, always thinking one step ahead. But even Holt felt the weight of the mission's significance. We'll be ready, Holt assured her, his voice gravelly but steady. And I don't plan on going in blind. This mission needs military precision. I'll handle that. You focus on the science, and we'll work together. Holt was a stark contrast to Dr. Rivera's academic world, where she saw the universe as a puzzle to be solved. Holt saw it as a battlefield. Yet, both had the same ultimate goal, to protect humanity's future. Together, they would lead the crew through the unknown. The fleet, made up of 10 state-of-the-art ships, was designed for the mission's dual purpose, exploration and defense. The flagship Endurance was a massive vessel equipped with the latest AI navigation systems, advanced communication technology, and defensive shields that could withstand the harshest conditions. The other ships carried personnel, resources, and cutting-edge weaponry in case of danger. Humanity was taking no chances. Days before launch, the public was introduced to the First Contact Initiative. News outlets around the world were filled with images of the sleek spacecraft being prepped for departure. It was a spectacle of technological achievement, and the world held its collective breath. The entire globe watched as the mission's official countdown began. The mission would take months to reach the signal's source, the deep space engines of the Endurance. would use a newly developed drive system that allowed the ships to travel at near light speeds, cutting the journey time from centuries to months. Yet, even at such speeds, the distance was daunting. 60 light years was a staggering gap. And the crew would need to be self-sufficient for the entire journey as the ships lined up for launch. A growing sense of anticipation gripped the crew. Some, like Dr. Rivera, were excited to be part of something historic, while others, like Commander Harris, were more cautious. Harris was a military officer through and through, and he believed that a show of force might be necessary. He didn't. Trust the unknown. Are we sure we're not making a mistake? Harris asked Captain Holt as they stood in the Endurance's command center, watching the final preparations. "We don't have a choice," Holt replied, his gaze fixed on the screen. "The signal isn't just an invitation. It's a cry for help. If we don't respond, we might never get another chance." Harris frowned. "And if they're not asking for help, but for something else?" "That's why we have you on this mission, Commander," Holt said with a grin. "To make sure we're prepared for the worst." With that, the final countdown began. The mission's goal was simple: follow the signal's trajectory. Reach the alien civilization, or what was left of it, and determine the nature of the message. But nothing about this mission felt simple. The unknown stretched out before them, like an endless void, as the ships began their journey. Dr. Rivera spent hours poring over every fragment of the signal they had intercepted. Every pattern, every pulse, every encoded message was being analyzed for clues. Something about the signal still gnawed at her, a sense that the message was only the beginning of something far more complex. The signal wasn't just a call for help. Dr. Rivera mused to her assistant, a young scientist named Amelia Tran. "It's a map. A trail. I think they want us to find them." "Find them? Who? The aliens?" "Yes," Rivera said, her voice filled with a mixture of wonder and trepidation. "And if I'm right, they've been waiting for us." The reality of what they were about to undertake began to sink in. They were not just traveling to a distant star. They were traveling into a story that had already begun, a story that, if they weren't careful, might end before they had a chance to understand it. Meanwhile, the crew, preparing for their long journey ahead, began to grapple with their own emotions. Fear of the unknown was natural, but so was the pull of discovery. Humanity was on the cusp of something monumental. They had already seen the promise of other civilizations beyond their own, the relics of ancient species discovered on Mars and Europa, but nothing had prepared them for this moment. As the fleet sailed deeper into the vastness of space, Earth's atmosphere shrank into a thin line in the rearview. The crew's final thoughts were the same. They were about to become the first humans to make contact with an alien intelligence source, so they hoped. But in the back of Dr. Rivera's mind, one question remained unanswered. What if... As the Endurance and its fleet of support ships hurtled through the void of deep space, the vastness of the universe seemed to grow even more intimidating. The stars were distant pinpricks, and the endless black stretched out in all directions. For the first time, humanity felt small. They were no longer tethered to the Earth, the cradle of their civilization. Here, in the emptiness, everything was uncertain. The crew had settled into a rhythm. Daily routines were established. The scientists worked in their labs, the engineers monitored the ship's systems, and the military personnel kept sharp with drills and simulations. But beneath the surface, tension simmered. Fear, curiosity, and excitement were all mixed together in the minds of the crew members. Dr. Ella Rivera, lost in her research, had begun to understand more about the alien signal. It wasn't just a distress call, it was a roadmap of sorts. But to what? Was it a literal map, leading them to a destination? Or was it something more abstract, a cultural or intellectual road to discovery? Each day brought new data, new pieces of the puzzle. But there were still too many gaps. We're not any closer to understanding who they are, Rivera said one evening. Sitting at a console in the observation deck, staring out at the dark expanse of space. The lights of the ship flickered softly as the hum of the engines reverberated throughout the vessel. The patterns are so complex, it's almost as though the signal is a test. Her assistant, Amelia Tran, joined her at the console, looking out at the stars. A test. How so? A test of intelligence, of capability, Rivera mused. I think whoever sent this message was gauging our ability to decipher it. To see if we were worth contacting. Or to see if we were worthy. Of meeting them, Amelia asked, her voice laced with curiosity. That's possible, Rivera said. She paused for a moment, her eyes scanning the endless void. But if that's the case, then what happens when we arrive? Will they welcome us with open arms, or will they see us as a threat? I don't know which possibility scares me more. Meanwhile, Captain Darius Holt kept the crew's spirits high, despite the growing unease. The voyage had taken months, and there was still no sign of the alien civilization. They had crossed dozens of star systems, but the signal remained just as elusive as it had been when they first received it. Every time they thought they were close, the signal would shift its source moving, as if it were purposefully evading them. I don't like this, Holt confided to Commander Harris one evening as they reviewed the latest data. The signal was supposed to be static, but it's not. It's like it's aware of us. A seasoned officer who had spent his life training for war nodded grimly. Maybe we're not just chasing a signal. Maybe we're being led on a hunt. That's what I'm afraid of, Holt replied, leaning back in his chair. We're venturing into a place we don't understand. And the further we go, the more I wonder if we'll get to the source of this signal or if the signal will bring us into something else entirely. Despite their concerns, the crew pressed on. They were getting closer. After all, Dr. Rivera had made another breakthrough, a deciphered sequence in the signal that led them to a specific point on the star map, a sector of the galaxy that had been unexplored up until now. The coordinates pointed to a region between two collapsed stars, a place known as the Graveyard of Suns. The name was fitting. No ships had dared venture into this space for centuries, due to the unstable gravitational forces of the dead stars. But this was where the signal led. The Endurance and its fleet altered course, heading toward the Graveyard of Suns. As they approached, the crew grew increasingly tense. The blackness of space in this area was unnatural, an emptiness so profound it felt oppressive. Even the stars seemed dimmer, more distant, as if they were trying to hide from whatever lay ahead. It's strange, Rivera said one day, as she observed the starfield. It's almost as if the signal is coming from inside the Graveyard of Suns. The stars there are supposed to be dead, but there's energy residual power, faint but detectable, almost like a beacon. Something's out there, and it wants us to find it, Holt replied, his voice taut with uncertainty. I don't know whether that's a good thing or a bad thing. The fleet slowed as they neared the center of the graveyard, each ship sending out pulses of energy, scanning the region for any signs of life, anything that could explain the bizarre readings they were receiving. The deeper they ventured into the star cluster, the more strange anomalies appeared, distortions in space-time, brief flashes of light that couldn't be explained, bursts of energy that seemed to pulse in rhythm with the signal itself. Dr. Rivera's excitement was palpable. This is it, she said. We're in the right place. There's something here, something hidden within the dying stars, waiting for us to uncover it. But as the fleet advanced, a feeling of foreboding crept through the crew. The further they went, the more the ship seemed to hum with an uneasy energy, the weight of something ancient pressing down on them. Something old, something forgotten. It was as if they were not just entering an unknown part of the galaxy, but trespassing on something long abandoned, now awakening to their presence. Suddenly, the signal spiked. A sharp, shrill sound rang through the comms channels, followed by a flood of data. Dr. Rivera's heart raced as the readout on her screen shifted into something unmistakably clear. "We found it," she whispered. "It's not just a signal, it's a message, a communication. They're speaking to us." But even as the words left her lips, a new question. The sudden spike in the signal was both thrilling and unsettling. Dr. Ella Rivera stared at the screen in front of her, her fingers hovering over the console. The data was overwhelming, a torrent of information flooding in, each wave more complex than the last. For a brief moment, the room was silent, save for the rhythmic hum of the Endurance's engines and the soft beeps of the control panels. The rest of the crew was on edge, waiting for her to make sense of it. "What's happening?" Captain Holt asked, his voice steady but laced with urgency. He stood at the doorway to the command center, a hand gripping the frame as if to steady himself against the tension. "I don't know yet," Rivera replied, her voice tight with concentration. She leaned forward, activating the decoding protocols again. The algorithms ran faster than before, attempting to decipher the alien language that had been embedded in the signal. The message was becoming clearer, but it was still too fragmented. Then, just as she was about to say something, the data coalesced, and the screen displayed a sequence of symbols, a language unlike anything they had ever seen. It was geometric, fluid, intricate, and layered with subtle meanings. The patterns shifted, seeming to adjust themselves as though they were reacting to the ship's presence in the graveyard of suns. Suddenly, the symbols stopped. The screen cleared, and a single static image appeared, a geometric shape that seemed to pulse with energy. It was a three-dimensional structure, something that appeared both organic and mechanical, shifting between forms. It resembled a fractal pattern, but more complex, more deliberate. And it was undeniably artificial. "This is it," Rivera breathed. "It's a message. But it's not just information, it's a visual language, a form of communication that's beyond what we expected." Amelia Tran leaned over her shoulder, squinting at the image. "It's beautiful, but what does it mean?" "Not sure yet," Rivera said, "but it's definitely a response. It's designed to show us something, maybe who they are or what they want." As she spoke, the image shifted. It began to rotate slowly on the screen, revealing more of its intricate design. The patterns seemed to glow, revealing layers beneath the surface, as if the message itself had depth, literal and metaphorical. As the structure rotated, the crew began to notice something even more alarming. There were faint, eerie lines of energy, cracks of light spreading from the edges of the design. The lines seemed to reach outward, as if seeking something beyond the confines of the screen. "Captain," Rivera said urgently, "we're receiving a transmission." But it's not just data. It's like a signal is being generated from within. The structure itself, the energy isn't just coming from them. It's responding to us. "Responding?" Holt echoed. He stepped closer to the screen, his brow furrowed. "How? I don't know. But this feels deliberate." Rivera paused, her eyes narrowing as the message shifted again. A new sequence appeared, this time in more abstract symbols, quickly followed by another sequence. Each was more complex than the last, almost as if the alien civilization was measuring the crew's ability to understand. Suddenly, the system sent out a soft ping, a pulse of data that wasn't just the usual stream of information. It was a question. The words "SIF" they could be called, that were distinct, and yet they had no audible sound, no voice behind them. Instead, the message was encoded in raw energy, a kind of telepathic transmission. The screen flickered, and Rivera's heart skipped a beat as the text appeared. glowing like a shimmering script. Who are you? It was simple, direct, and yet profoundly unsettling. The words echoed through the room, though there had been no sound. The silence in the command center grew thick, each person absorbing the gravity of the question. The reality of the moment hit hard. This was it. Humanity was not just hearing from an alien civilization. They were being asked a question. Dr. Rivera's voice was barely a whisper. It's speaking to us. For a moment, no one spoke. The weight of the message hung in the air like a thick fog. There was no indication of what might come next, no answer to the question, just the question itself. The crew members, for the first time since the journey began, felt the full weight of what they were undertaking. They were no longer simply explorers, they were ambassadors, representatives of all humanity. Standing at the threshold of an entirely new chapter in the story of the species. What do we do? Commander Harris's voice cut through the tension, his face a mixture of disbelief and caution. Holt exchanged a glance with Rivera. We respond. It's not that simple, Rivera said, her eyes scanning the screen, searching for more. We don't even know if they can understand us, let alone how to answer them. This message, ... It's more than just a question. It's a challenge. A test, Harris scowled. A test? A test for what? Rivera took a deep breath. Test. Of us, of who we are. They're asking us to define ourselves, our identity. And I think they want to know if we're ready to take the next step. The crew stood frozen for a long moment, the silence stretching into something almost unbearable. And then Rivera turned to Holt. We need to prepare a response, but we can't rush it. We need to answer thoughtfully, carefully. We can't afford to misstep. Holt nodded slowly. I agree. But we're also running out of time. If we don't answer soon, we may not have another chance. As they considered their next move, the ominous weight of the alien message settled over the ship. They were at a crossroads, facing not just an alien intelligence but the very future of humanity's place in the universe. The question had been asked. The crew of the Endurance was in turmoil. The silence that followed the alien question, "Who are you?" had stretched long enough to make every person aboard feel the weight of its significance. This wasn't just a request for information. It was a challenge, one that could define the future of humanity. The message had shifted from a scientific anomaly to an existential moment. Dr. Rivera sat in her private lab, combing through the data, the glowing symbols from the alien transmission lingering on the screen in front of her. Question A had received wasn't just linguistic. It was multidimensional, layered in meaning, and possibly laden with tests and expectations. She had always believed that science was about answering questions, but now she was faced with one that had no clear answer. Not only that, it was a question of identity. The deeper she examined the alien message, the more she felt the cold grip of uncertainty. Who are we? She muttered to herself, unable to escape the paradox. She felt the weight of humanity's history, its wars, triumphs, and failures, all bound together by this single, simple question. Was their species ready for contact? Were they even ready to define themselves in the face of something so alien? Her assistant, Amelia Tran, broke her reverie, entering the lab with a grim expression. Dr. Rivera, the captain wants us in the command center. Reluctantly, Rivera left her lab. The walls of the Endurance felt different now, thicker, heavier, as if the ship itself had become a reflection of their journey into uncharted territories. The uncertainty in the air was palpable. When Rivera arrived in the command center, she found Captain Holt, Commander Harris, and the rest of the senior crew gathered around a large holographic table. They were all focused on the screen, which still displayed the alien message. The question was no longer just text. was now a symbol that pulsed and flickered as if it were alive. "We need to respond," Holt said, without preamble. "I'm tired of waiting. The sooner we communicate, the sooner we'll know what they want from us or what they're capable of." "I agree with the urgency," Rivera said, taking her place at the table. "But I'm still trying to process what kind of answer we should give. The message isn't just asking for a name or a history, asking for our essence. It's a test of who we are. So, we define ourselves?" Harris asked, his tone a mixture of skepticism and worry. "But how do we know what they'll accept? What if we give the wrong answer? It's not about what they want to hear." Rivera replied, looking at the group. "It's about what we are, what we've become. Our history is full of conflict and strife, but it's also full of hope and progress. We've made mistakes, but we've learned from them. Our answer needs to reflect that complexity. So, we tell them the truth," Ira said, raising an eyebrow. "That we're a species on the brink of self-destruction, but with the potential for greatness. We tell them we're not perfect," Rivera said softly, "but we're trying. We're evolving, and we're ready to learn. But more importantly, we need to tell them we want to understand them. Not just their technology, but their culture, their perspective on the universe." Captain Holt rubbed his chin, his expression conflicted. "I don't know, Rivera. This is risky. If we come off as weak or unsure, we might lose their respect. If they're advanced enough to send us a message, they might be looking for something more than just a species with potential. They might want something else. And what if they want to understand us as much as we want to understand them?" Rivera countered. "We can't predict their motives, but we can control how we present ourselves. If we don't answer honestly, we risk making a worse impression than if we just lay everything out there." "I don't disagree," Holt said, pausing. "But you're asking a lot of us. This isn't just diplomacy, this is first contact. The future of humanity's relationship with these beings could depend on this moment." The crew fell silent, the weight of their collective responsibility settling on their shoulders. They were no longer explorers on a mission of discovery. They were representatives of an entire species, standing on the edge of something unimaginable. Finally, Commander Harris spoke up. "What if we take a middle ground? We give them an honest answer, but we also tell them we're not ready to fully define ourselves. We could say that humanity is still in the process of finding its place in the universe. That we're a species in flux, struggling with our past, but with the desire to evolve and learn." Rivera nodded. "That's a good approach. It's humble, but it's not defeatist. It's honest without being self-deprecating." The tension in the room eased slightly as the crew began to come to a consensus. "All right," Holt said, nodding. "We'll send a message. But we need to make sure it's clear that we're ready to engage. We don't want them thinking we're unwilling to learn or unwilling to cooperate." As the crew began to draft the message, Rivera stood back and looked at the stars through the command center's viewport. The universe outside seemed to have grown more intimate, more filled with possibility, yet more terrifying at the same time. The aliens were out there, waiting, watching, and their first question had already reshaped everything humanity knew. Who are we? The question reverberated in her mind, but now, for the first time, Rivera felt like she had an answer that wasn't just about the past, but about the future. Humanity was still writing its story, and this alien encounter was just the next chapter. But it was one they would need to write carefully, as the message was finalized and transmitted. The crew of the Endurance braced themselves. The ball was in the alien's court. The message was sent. The hum of the Endurance's engines seemed to intensify as the crew awaited a response. But in the vast emptiness of space, time felt distorted. Every minute dragged on as though they were waiting in an endless limbo. The crew was exhausted, but the anticipation kept them awake. Every shift, every motion of the stars outside the ship, every ripple in the data stream from the alien source seemed to be a clue. A sign that the next moment might bring something monumental. But nothing came. For days, the crew received no answer. The message was clear, concise, and honest, true reflection of humanity's complexities, its struggles, and its hopes for the future. They had extended an olive branch to the unknown, but now it hung in the silence of space. The air on the Endurance had shifted, as if the universe itself was holding its breath. Dr. Rivera found herself unable to focus. She'd spent years studying distant stars, anomalies, and theoretical civilizations, but nothing had prepared her for this moment. The signal from the aliens had felt like a challenge, a puzzle she was almost certain she could solve. Yet now, with their response hanging in the air, she couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong. The silence wasn't just an absence of communication, it was a message in itself. Amelia Tran, who had been by her side since the beginning of the journey, was equally uneasy. "Do you think they're trying to understand us, or that we've said something wrong?" "I don't know," Rivera admitted, rubbing her temples. "We were honest. I don't think we could have been clearer. But they didn't just ask a question. They probed us, and now they're watching. They want to see if we deserve to be part of something greater, if we're worthy." The weight of her own words hung heavy in the lab. Worthy. Humanity had never been perfect, far from it. But now, faced with this alien intelligence, the question seemed both too simple and too profound. Worthy of what? Meanwhile, in the command center, Captain Holt paced. He wasn't the kind of man who liked to wait, especially when it involved such a critical situation. The lack of response was gnawing at him. Every hour that passed seemed to deepen his sense of unease. What if they had misunderstood the signal? What if this was their only chance and they had wasted it? Commander Harris entered the room with a report. "Still nothing from the signal source, but we've detected another anomaly. It's faint, but it's definitely a pattern." Holt's ears perked up at the mention of a pattern. "What do you mean, anomaly?" Harris swiped a control panel, bringing up a new set of data on the large screen. The pattern was strange intermittent bursts of energy that didn't quite match any natural phenomena. It was rhythmic, and the way it pulsed reminded Holt of the previous signal, though much weaker. It's similar to the original signal, but it's irregular, almost like someone is trying to send us something, but they're either unsure or testing us. Rivera, who had been listening in, entered the room. It could be a secondary form of communication. Maybe they're responding, but in a way that requires us to decode it. "Great," Holt muttered. "More puzzles." Rivera held up a hand. "I don't think it's a puzzle this time. If they're testing us, it's more likely a way of assessing our readiness, our patience, our adaptability. This could be their way of seeing how we respond to ambiguity." "Or, it's a trap," Harris interjected, his expression hardening. The first question was simple, but now this. It doesn't sit right. What if they want us to make a mistake? What if they've been waiting for us to falter? Holt turned to Rivera. "What do you think?" Rivera hesitated. "I think we need to listen more carefully. It's clear they want us to show more than just intellectual capability. They want us to prove our maturity, our readiness to interact with them, with the universe. To them, we might be a young species, one that's still learning. Their silence is a test," Holt said, "and it's testing us in real time." The message from the alien race wasn't just a physical phenomenon, it was a test of humanity's capacity to endure uncertainty. Every response or lack of response had consequences. The question wasn't what the aliens were trying to say, but how humanity would respond to the unknown. Days turned into weeks, and the crew's patience began to wear thin. It was becoming harder to keep morale high. The crew knew they were part of something historic, but the uncertainty was taking its toll. Even those who had been confident at the start of the journey were starting to waver. Unsure of whether their decision to reach out to the aliens had been the right one, Rivera found herself losing sleep, the weight of the unknown pressing down on her more with each passing hour. She began to wonder if they had missed something in their response. Maybe they hadn't been clear enough. Maybe the aliens were trying to test their ability to persevere, to hold their ground in the face of frustration. But then, one day, as Rivera sat in front of her console, exhausted and close to giving up, the silence was broken. A burst of static flooded the ship's communication systems, followed by a soft, eerie pulse that shook the console. A few seconds passed, and then a new message appeared on the screen. It was simple, yet the weight of it was immeasurable. We are watching. You have shown patience. Now, show us your resolve. The message was clear. The aliens had been observing all along, waiting to see how humanity would handle the silence. The test was not just about intellect or technology, it was about character. Humanity had passed. The message had come like a thunderclap. We are watching. You have shown patience. Now, show us your resolve. For a brief moment, the crew of the Endurance was silent, each person processing the words in their own way. The tension in the command center was palpable, electric. Humanity had been tested and had passed the first phase. But what did resolve truly mean? How would they prove it to beings who could see through their every action, who could read their intentions in a way that felt almost omniscient? Dr. Rivera felt the gravity of the statement like a weight pressing down on her chest. Resolve. The word echoed in her mind. What had humanity ever truly shown in the face of adversity? She knew their history: wars, poverty, environmental collapse. They had always fought, always pressed forward, even when hope seemed impossible. Resolve had been there, beneath it all, even if they hadn't always recognized it. Yet, now, the aliens were asking for something different. The question they had asked was no longer about who humanity was. It was about what humanity was capable of becoming. Could they live up to their potential? Could they prove they were worthy of interacting with these advanced beings? Worthy of understanding the great mysteries of the universe? Captain, Rivera said, her voice steady despite the whirlwind of thoughts in her head. We need to interpret this. Resolve isn't just about endurance. It's a test of our spirit. It's a test of our spirit. Holt nodded, though his expression remained cautious. I've been thinking about that word too. Resolve. It's not just patience. It's courage. It's the ability to face danger without hesitation. The willingness to make decisions without knowing the full cost. He turned to Commander Harris, who was already making adjustments on his station. What are the options, Commander? Harris glanced up, eyes sharp. Well, based on what we've seen, we can interpret it one of two ways. Either we continue to show our willingness to cooperate, to keep sending peaceful diplomatic responses, or we take a more proactive approach and initiate contact ourselves. If we do that, we might be risking a confrontation, but it could show them we're willing to take action. The tension in the room spiked. The idea of taking the initiative was daunting. They had no idea what the aliens were capable of, or whether their intentions were peaceful or something else entirely. Every member of the crew understood that the stakes were unimaginably high. Taking action without fully understanding them could backfire, Rivera said, stepping forward. We need to show our resolve, but we need to do it wisely. We can't afford to act rashly. Wisely? Harris snorted, his frustration bubbling to the surface. We've been nothing but wise, and look where that's gotten us. Nowhere. They've barely given us anything to work with. We're stuck in this endless game of waiting for their next move. Commander Holt said firmly, I understand your frustration. But let's not forget, This is more than a game. If we show desperation, we could jeopardize everything. We need to remain patient and composed. Our resolve will be tested, but we need to respond with intelligence. Amelia Tran, who had been sitting quietly in the background, suddenly spoke up. What if we did something ... symbolic? Something that demonstrated both our resolve and our willingness to engage, but also respected the nature of their challenge. The room fell silent as everyone turned to her. What kind of symbol? Holt asked, his curiosity piqued. Tran hesitated for a moment. In our history, humanity has always sought to communicate through gestures of peace art, music, and sometimes technology. What if we sent a message that was more than just words? What if we sent them something, created something uniquely human? Rivera's eyes lit up. A representation of our culture, our creativity, our identity through art, not just logic or diplomacy. That's what I'm thinking, Tran said. We've been focusing so much on direct communication, but maybe the answer lies in something less literal. Maybe they want to see what we've created, how we express ourselves beyond the intellectual. I like it, Holt said after a moment's pause. It's bold, it's different. It's us showing them who we are on a deeper level than we've done before. What kind of message? Harris asked skeptically. Music, paintings, sculptures? Something unique. To our technological capacity, too, Rivera suggested. It needs to speak to the intelligence of the species, but also to the heart. Maybe a mix of something visual and musical. Something that combines science and art. Maybe even a visual holographic message that expresses our culture and our potential. The crew began brainstorming, their ideas flowing more freely now that they had something tangible to work toward. They decided to send a series of visual representations, images of Earth, of human history, art, music, and the sciences. A holographic composition of the species' greatest achievements. An abstract display that could capture both their intellectual progress and their emotional depth. It was a monumental task. A collage of humanity's very essence, encoded in the medium that the aliens could most likely understand. But as the team worked late into the night, the sense of purpose began to take hold. They were no longer waiting passively. They were actively shaping their message, using every tool at their disposal to communicate their readiness, their strength, and their ability to connect. The transmission was ready by the following day. Synthesis of human creation, a message that spanned from the ancient past to the cutting edge of technology. As they initiated the transmission, Rivera stood by the viewport, gazing out into the infinite void of space. She knew the aliens were out there, watching. But now, humanity had done more than simply endure. The moment the transmission was sent, an eerie silence descended over the Endurance. The glowing patterns of the message, harmonious blend of visual art, music, and human achievements disappeared into the vastness of space, traveling toward the distant alien source. Every crew member stood still, staring at the console, watching the progress bar slowly climb as the message began its journey. It felt surreal, as though they had just crossed a threshold from which there was no return. Dr. Rivera stood at the front of the command center, her eyes fixed on the screen. The message was no longer just data, was humanity's essence, a reflection of all they had been and all they hoped to become. It was their very identity, now streaming through the cosmos, reaching out to the unknown. We've done everything we can, Holt said quietly, his voice thick with a mixture of hope and uncertainty. Now, it's out of our hands. Commander Harris, who had been tense ever since the Endurance first received the alien signal, ran a hand through his hair. I can't help but feel like we're on the edge of something big. But what if they don't respond? What if it wasn't enough? We can't think like that, Rivera replied firmly. We've done more than show our resolve. we've shown. Who we are, our creativity, our willingness to adapt, and our capacity for growth. Now we wait, but with conviction. As the crew waited in tense anticipation, the hours dragged on. The hum of the ship, once a constant comfort, now seemed louder than ever, as if it were echoing the uncertainty in the room. The crew remained, glued to their stations, hoping for any sign of a response. Then, just as the crew began to think the message had been lost in the vastness of space, the ship's systems flickered. A burst of energy flooded the sensors, followed by a sudden surge of data. The ship's AI processed the incoming signal almost instantly, and the command center lit up with a new message. "Captain," Harris shouted, his voice full of disbelief. "It's them," they've responded. The room erupted in a mixture of relief and excitement. Holt wasted no time. "Patch it through, Commander." The main screen flickered to life, and there, before the crew of the Endurance, appeared an image that left everyone speechless. It wasn't a text message this time, it was an image, a visual display that was at once beautiful and unfathomable. A vast cityscape stretching out across the surface of a distant planet, but it wasn't like any human city. The architecture was fluid, organic, and geometric, twisting and turning in impossible shapes. It seemed to pulse with life, as if the city itself were breathing. Rivera's breath caught in her throat. This was a civilization, alive and vibrant, beyond anything they had imagined. But the most remarkable part was the way the image was displayed. It was a visual message, a response to their own message of creation. The alien city was alive, responding to the humans' own representation of their essence. The image then shifted, morphing into a complex array of geometric patterns. It wasn't static. Every line seemed to vibrate with meaning, every shape layered with depth. It was clear the message wasn't just a reply, but a communication of thought, an exchange of understanding, and then a voice, ethereal and deeply resonant, filled the room. It wasn't like anything the crew had ever heard, wasn't even audible, but rather vibrated in the very air itself. It was more like an impression, a presence that they could feel in their bones. "You are the first to reach us with your heart, with your spirit. The universe watches, and now you will be shown. This is your beginning. This is your resolve." The words seemed to echo in the command center, but they were not mere sounds. They resonated with the soul of the crew. It was as if the aliens had perceived humanity's deepest essence, understood their struggles, and recognized their potential. The message was clear. Humanity had passed the test, not just of intellect or creativity, but of heart. The aliens had been watching for something more than technological prowess. They had been watching for the soul of a species. Holt stepped forward, his voice calm, but with a new sense of awe. "This is just the beginning, isn't it?" Rivera nodded, her face illuminated by the holographic display. "It's just the beginning. They see us as we are, flawed, yet capable of great things. They've acknowledged our resolve, but the real test is what we do next." The message from the alien civilization flickered one last time. The cityscape shifted into a new form, something more abstract, a blend of colors and shapes that seemed to invite humanity into a new way of thinking, a way of being. "You are invited to explore. You are invited to join us. But the path will not be easy. You must continue to grow, to learn, and to evolve. This is your invitation to the stars." The transmission ended as abruptly as it had begun, leaving the crew staring at the blank screen in stunned silence. For a moment, no one spoke. The weight of the moment, the enormity of what had just occurred, hung in the air like a heavy fog. Finally, Holt turned to the crew, a slow smile spreading across his face. "We've done it. We've truly done it." Dr. Rivera looked out into the vast expanse of space, the stars glittering like distant promises. She had spent her entire life trying to understand the universe, but now, for the first time, She felt like humanity had truly belonged in it. The aliens had watched them, tested them, and now they had extended a hand. Humanity had passed the test, and the future lay before them, wide and open. But it was up